In this podcast, we're going to cover creating basic shapes. To start off with is that we're going to open up our shape editor, which I made a little shelf button on here by going under Windows, Animation, and then holding Control and Shift and doing Shape Editor. Okay, so we're going to click on Face Blends and add a target. Okay, and we're going to call this Smile right there. Now, we do want to make sure that when we're done with our blend shapes, we turn our edit mode off. It even tells us down here we're editing a shape. I'm going to close this down. Now you can move this geometry anywhere you want in the scene, pretty much at any time on here. But what you can't do is freeze transforms on it, because that will ruin its shape back to the actual blend shape. You'll see all of a sudden the blend shape will slide over to it instead. That's bad. If that happens, there's not really an easy way of fixing that, not without running scripts and things like that. Okay, so now we're going to go into the modeling menu. We're going to go into our edit mesh and our mesh tools and go into our sculpting tools. And these are going to focus primarily on the Mudbox tools in Maya. And we're going to focus mainly on the grab tool, but we'll still be touching on smooth and relax. What we will not be doing is doing anything who alters the entire geometry or adds subdivisions or anything to the character. Because what will happen is if you do an overall smooth or do a subdivision and unsubdivide it, it moves all the vertices just a little bit, which will ruin the original blend shape. Okay, so that being said, we're going to go into grab mode. And you'll notice in here we got our brush. And one of the first things we want to focus on is the size of our brush. Now, based upon the size of your scene, your brush might be either really big or really small. It might be something like this. You hold down B and I can just make it real big. It could be something like this. And this will move the entire model, which is bad. So if I double click on the move tool, I can go in here and just say size 0. And then I can go over my geometry, hold down B, and then increase my size of my brush, like that. I can close this guy down. So then I can start sculpting. So another thing I've found that's a little bit weird of the Mudbox tools is that when you undo, like I'm undoing, and you notice it's not doing anything, it doesn't actually update until you move a little bit on the geometry itself. So that's a little weird. And maybe in different versions of Maya that will get more updated on here, but at this current point, undoing does not immediately necessarily bring back your shift back to the previous save. Now I know if you select away from it and you undo, that will absolutely go phase by phase and go through it. I want to make sure I didn't get rid of my blend shape. I did not. Okay, so let's go some sculpting, and we're going to grab, and I want to actually work on symmetry, which up here, if we can click up here, I'm going to do Object X. Now Object X has had issues in Mudbox itself, especially using with the freeze tool, but I don't know if there's any of those issues on mine. I'll talk again. We'll play around with that when we get to the freeze tool on there, but we're going to go into Object X and go from here. Now, at this point, I'm going to shift over to my Wacom tablet. There are tools on here. The grab tool works fine with the mouse, but stuff like the wax tool, there are tools that puff out and they need more of a subtlety to it that it doesn't really work with the mouse. So in this case, we're going to do a smile, and we're going to focus on how the muscles are pulling up from the skin. So you have something called a node here, which is actually going to pull up, and you have like a couple of chords coming down your face that are going from here. Now we want to move up the side. Now I'm going to make my brush pretty damn big, so when we pull this up, you're grabbing a lot of the vertices around it on there. So let's say I'm happy with that smile. Now we don't want to pull out too far out to the side. Now you see I just undid, and I'll just click on the model and it'll go back. We also don't want to impact in the teeth. We don't want to see intersecting geometry. Those are things we want to be very careful of. So now I can go in here and I can bring this up like that. Now let's say I'm happy with that. The problem is that when I go back up into my shape editor and I move up and down, we're just moving the corners of the mouth. And we want to move the front in here because skin slides and skin gets tugged. So I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, which it did not trigger, which does happen. And then I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to start pushing the topology up in that direction. And it's really important that you can see your wireframe while you're doing this. That's a bit much. And I'm actually moving it in the direction that it goes through. Now I didn't move the lower jaw yet. So you can see we go from there like that. And we start getting in here. I think this is a bit much in here. So go from that, and then I'll just bring this up here. I will say there's one feature that the Mudbox tools does not have that I really like in ZBrush is the transpose geometry tool, where it'll look at it won't go across topology on there. So that doesn't look too bad. You know, maybe I can pull this up a little further here. I'll move this out this way too. Okay, so that's pretty much the smile right off the bat, and we're going to kind of make separate shapes that go over different podcasts that go over different shapes and things like that. But that's pretty much our first shape on there, and then we'll move on to our next shape when we go from that. But that being said, we will turn our edit mode off, and I can turn that on and off. We can see how that's going from there. Okay,